Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. So, if you can't tell, this is another one of these videos where, look, I'm following this political situation very closely now. And as we'll get into here in a moment, there looks to be a pending no confidence vote now coming against the current prime minister, nominal prime minister, whatever you want to call her. I can't even believe that there are enough people that are willing to back her at this point after her actions as of late. That said, look, I take this really, really seriously, and I want to be clear, I'm not a partisan person, and I've stayed away from this kind of stuff in the past, but this is on a whole order of magnitude above anything I've ever seen in Thai politics in nearly 20 years. I've never even heard of this, okay? In fact, everything I was taught, especially during the naturalization process, and I did go through sort of historical study, not only language, but also like the history of Thailand. I learned a lot about like the evolution of the political systems. This is just anathema to how Thais operate. And it's what concerns me so. And when I view it in the context of her actions with regard to the World Economic Forum and the World Economic Forum spokespeople themselves talking about how they'll infiltrate the cabinets of the various nation states of the world and use it to subvert them, to bring them to their vision of this supranational state wherein we'll all own nothing and be happy. I view all this in its totality, and I think, again, I've talked about it in a prior video, much akin to there came a certain point during COVID where I just was like, wait, none of this is making sense. It clearly looks like people are operating to the detriment of the common man. And I just felt like I had to speak up on it. And that's sort of where I'm at with this at this point. This, as a Thai, and yeah, I'm going to make another video coming up here. I've seen all these comments and these trolls, whatever, telling me I'm not a real Thai. And even though I'm naturalized, they can always revoke it and stuff. You think I'm unaware I'm not a quote unquote real Thai? Every time I look in the mirror, I look at myself and say, hey, how many blonde-haired, blue-eyed Thais are there out there? They're around. I've met them. I see some of them on a frequent basis. But yeah, I get it, okay? And by the way, no Thai person I've ever interacted with has ever treated me like that, okay? Most Thais are aware that, I went through a lot to become a Thai. And I'm very proud to be a Thai. It's one of the reasons I'm doing this. Because quite frankly, I am in a unique position. And people say, well, why don't you speak Thai on your channel? I'm not great at Thai compared to a fluent Thai speaker. What would the point of that be? I'm very articulate in English, and by the way, I view my sort of role as to provide some level of elucidation, illumination, and perhaps commentary on the nuances of the Thai system, be it the legal system, now the political system, whatever. Hate somewhere else, or I guess hate in the comments because it helps my channel algorithmically, so, pour it on. But yeah, I'm not unaware that I was not born Thai. I was born in Kansas. I was born in the country of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. I wasn't, born in downtown Bangkok. I get it. I see it every day when I look in the mirror. That said, this country's been good to me. It's taken care of me. And two things one principle I really believe in is you dance with the ones that brought you. And the Thais took care of me, and Thailand took care of me. World Economic Forum hadn't done anything for me. And one of the reasons, frankly, looking back especially, I found comfort in East Asia. I first moved to Korea before I came down here. I was only there briefly. Was I realized now I was running from this corrosion from the likes of the World Economic Forum and Davos and this movement to homogenize the nation states of the world basically toward the end of creating some sort of hybrid between fascism and communism, basically serfdom with clerks is the only thing I can describe it as. In retrospect, I was trying to avoid that. I was trying to get away from that. I also think inherently, I'm descended from people that just kind of preferred being on the frontier, if you will. But long story short, I was trying to get away from that. And it's now come here. And I don't like to see it destroying, frankly, or attempting to destroy the country I have come to know and love. And that's why I'm making these videos, and that's why I get so upset about this stuff. And yes, haters, I'm well aware that I'm not a real Thai, but I'm as Thai as I'm ever gonna get. So, as they say, cowboy enough, well, I'm Thai enough, whatever. In any event, I also wanted to comment regarding the photos. So this will be the third time we've used this photo of Paetongtarn and Hun Sen, mostly because, as I'll quote in one of the articles I'm going to cite in here, or the article, main one I'm going to cite in here, it shows the obsequious, for lack of a better term, submissiveness, to paraphrase this upcoming citation, of Paetongtarn toward this guy. I don't know what the deal is, what the hold is over her, but she's the prime minister of Thailand. I don't understand where this attitude on her part comes from, hence the reason I keep using that same photo. The other photo in there, and in the photo credit below, it'll take you to a link to a site that'll talk about, that's actually the cover of a book that was written about the Munich Agreement, that, so-called peace in our time between Neville Chamberlain and, the leader. Knowing YouTube, if I use certain words, it'll cause the algorithm to kick me back or whatever, but let's say the leader of Germany at the time, and it revolved around basically the handover of what was called the Sudetenland to Germany at the time. And I'm also kind of a scholar of history, and there's one historical character among a few that has always sort of stood out to me. When I watched the movie Schindler's List, Oskar Schindler fascinated me. I've read multiple biographies on Schindler. Super complicated guy. He's not like a saint by any stretch of the imagination, but he saved a lot of lives of people at a time that it was very difficult to do that, and it was not sort of politically correct to do that in any stretch. In fact, he was risking his life to do it. But he was actually a Sudeten German, and the reason I get into this is I've read that book that's in the thumbnail, but I've also read about Schindler, and he's very controversial in Czechoslovakia because he worked for the German Abwehr and he was instrumental in all of that handover. But it's analogous, at least to some degree, to what's going on here, because it comes down to the issue of a foreign sovereign, frankly, dictating to another country, how their borderlands should be administered, basically. And again, appeasement isn't even quite, or peace in our time, or looking at it through quite the lens of Chamberlain, isn't even quite analogous under the current situation, because Chamberlain was an outside actor. He was British, and he basically, the thinking was, we're going to appease Germany for the moment in order to buy time, and he himself said this, to rearm toward what they perceived to be was the coming of another conflict. So, this would more be, the current situation looks to me as more akin to the notion that if the Czech president, I think they had a president at the time, if the Czech president himself just unilaterally was handing over Sudetenland. I mean, that's kind of more like what we're looking at right now. But again, the historical analog is worth analyzing, and that's the reason for the thumbnail. So that said, I thought of making this video after reading a recent article, and hats off to the Bangkok Post. They're covering all this stuff really well. I'm going to quote a lot of this, but the article goes on in great detail. I urge those who are watching this video, go check out Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com. That said, article is titled BJT puts PM in firing line. Quoting directly, the Boomjai Thai Party will file a no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra amid the fallout of the leaked audio clip of her talking with Cambodian strongman Hun Sen. Quote, the motion is set to be filed once the third parliamentary session opens on July 3rd, unquote, she said, following a joint meeting between the party's executive committee and its MPs. Again, I urge those who are watching this video, there's other context in there, but long story short, and I urge those to watch that, to check out that article. Boomjai Thai was part of the coalition. This is something to understand. Was part of the coalition. They've left the coalition. They've said, hey, we're not doing this. And candidly, I've said before, I have sort of an affinity for Anutin Chanwirakul in kind of as a political observer. I just kind of like the cut of his jib, if you will. The way he does things, I find it to be very pragmatic. He tends to, in the past, I'm not saying I've agreed with everything. In fact, during COVID, when he was Minister of Public Health, I was vocally in opposition to certain things he did during that time. So, take it for how you will. But the past couple of years, I've felt like that he was somebody that was looking out for the best interests of Thailand. That said, I try to remain as nonpartisan as possible, and I mention that just so folks who are watching may understand any biases that I may not even understand that I have. So that said, Bumjai Thai has filed this is going to file this no confidence motion. I will definitely be keeping track of that, because if it isn't abundantly clear from my videos thus far, you know, I definitely think that this prime minister needs to step aside. I mean, we're either talking about something where there was intent here, and if that's the case, you know, this conduct is reprehensible, you know, morally, ethically, frankly, legally probably, although I can't really adjudicate to that. But, you know, also just as a lay Thai person, I don't want somebody like that being the PM. So yeah, I think that she needs to step aside. Now, that said, you know, going through the motions of getting that done remains to be seen. Also, as we've discussed in other videos, the Constitutional Court is going to be taking up some of this, and the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which is mentioned at length in that article. I'm not going to go into great detail into that analysis in this video, but it's mentioned in that article. Again, I urge those who are watching this video, check that out. They seem to be taking an active role in this, and I expect, based on what I'm reading, their sort of activities may be at the forefront of any opposition to, not opposition, but any actions that may come against her moving forward. So again, check out that article for further context there. Real quick, as we've discussed in other videos, we do have a paid news service on here. If you are interested in its longer form content, albeit this video is probably going to be pretty long, media@integrity-legal.com. I'm doing videos more for the expat audience and how all of these machinations and how all of these events may have an impact on folks in expat Thailand, expat Southeast Asia. Also, as I've discussed in other videos, Pancake Palace. Those who are interested in American diner-style food, we're in downtown Bangkok between Silom and Surwong Road, Soi Anuman Rajadon. We are serving pancakes, obviously, breakfast anytime, cheeseburgers, buffalo wings, chili, all of that kind of good stuff. If that's something that interests you, we'd love to see you down at the Pancake Palace. Link to a map in the description below for our location here in downtown Bangkok. That said, coming back to Bumjai Thai and Anutin Chanwirakul specifically, quoting directly, Anutin Chanwirakul, Bumjai Thai leader, said at the joint meeting that the party has received strong support from local people, affirming that it has made the right decision to leave the coalition government. Quote, "We will do our best as an opposition party," and I thought this was key, "and none of our MPs have decided to leave the party after we joined the opposition," unquote, he said. It's worth pointing out, and I discussed this in other videos, the Democrat Party has said that they have a considered consensus regarding this whole matter. And as we've discussed, not so much in other videos, but you can read about it a lot in the Bangkok Post, UTN, the United Thai Nation Party, I think that's their name, their executive board is sort of saying one thing, they're staying in, but it's kind of mixed. There seems to be a lot of rifts within that party. The point I'm trying to make is the current coalition, I think, is nominal at best. So I'm not convinced that when you read in the Bangkok Post that they have I think they'll say 261 votes out of a total of whatever it is, 459 or whatever. I'm not convinced all those votes are there. You know, again, the executive boards of these parties may have signed on with the current setup, probably in order to get some kind of position in the cabinet for their executive, you know, leadership, presumably, although I am speculating there. But I'm not convinced that the whole parties, their rank and file, the actual members of parliament are completely on board with this. But it's notable that Bumjai Thai left the coalition and none of their people defected. So if that gives you any kind of insight into the nuance of what's going on here, I think that's a pretty good barometer of at least sort of the attitudes of certain folks. That said, quoting further, as the opposition party, the party does not support the entertainment complex bill. Now, this is key critical. I'll get to that in a moment. Earlier, the party was on the government side and had to support the bill, he said. So this is something worth pointing out. I made a video that went up at 7:45 a.m. this morning, presuming this video goes up when I think it will, approximately 11:45 a.m. same day, where I discussed what's the proposed interior minister moving over from defense ministry and why that's occurring. And my speculation is, and still is, look, one, in this entertainment complex bill, to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been changed that foreigners could end up owning casinos outright in Thailand if the bill is to pass. And then the next question was, and you sort of put two and two together, the Interior Minister has the authority to sign off on foreign ownership of land in Thailand under certain circumstances. So the question then posed is that the big plan behind all of this, to push the entertainment complex bill? And as I discussed in that prior video, even the Speaker of the House seemed to be, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but it seemed like he was kind of hinting at or implying, if you will, that, look, there's going to be kind of a political issue between pushing through the entertainment complex bill versus the budget. And I think one of the reasons many political actors may be still on board with this supposed coalition is everybody wants to get the budget passed so we can get through the next fiscal year. You know, everybody will have our house in order financially, and then deal with the political fallout of what's occurred since this phone call and all of that stuff. Again, I can understand the argument behind saying, hey, we need to be pragmatic, let's get the budget done. But it also looks like the core coalition party's main priority is passing this entertainment complex bill. And to what end? To sell a bunch of wholly foreign-owned casino enterprises along with the land to foreigners? I don't think that's an outlandish question to ask based on the totality of the facts that are in front of us right now. That said, quoting further, Ms. Paetongtarn said she is ready to respond to all questions posed by the Constitutional Court. Yeah, and apparently the Constitutional Court has now taken this up. They're going to be reviewing this. Quoting further, over the leaked audio clip asserting that she has done nothing to damage the nation. Nothing to damage the nation? I mean, I did the video with the thumbnail, you don't got to be Stonewall Jackson to know you don't want to undermine your own field commander. You know, you called your own field commander the opposition and an opponent. And then meanwhile, basically caved anything Hun Sen wanted with regard to the border. You know, I mean, and I've cited all of this. This no damage. I mean, what? You know, meanwhile, Hun Sen's over there talking about his Thaksin Shinawatra room in his house and his Yingluck room in his house, and frankly, just making a mockery of us. And I know that's not exactly a geopolitical consideration, but as a Thai, I find it to be a bit of an affront. You know, it's just ridiculous. That said, quoting further, Ms. Paetongtarn said that she is prepared to provide full information and clarification. She reiterated that the audio clip involved a type of diplomatic conversation commonly held between national leaders. Yeah, like appeasement? Just give them whatever they want? I mean, and again, it's not even historically analogous because, again, when Chamberlain went in and got peace in our time, he was doing that on behalf of British interests. Now, you can argue the moral, ethical, and legal, you know, ramifications of selling out a third party for your own interests, which you could argue that's what happened there, and I don't want to go too deep into that. But he wasn't even selling out his own country. You know, here, this would be like the president of Czechoslovakia, you know, saying, yeah, the Sudetenland, yeah, go ahead. You know, I just, and again, this isn't hyperbole. This really is, that's not an inaccurate analogy to my mind. That said, quoting further, the content, she insisted, clearly shows that she had not caused any harm to Thailand. Really? Says you. I mean, you know, I've got another video coming up talking about, and they talk about it in this article, that there's groups now forming that are protesting. Now they're going to do it peacefully, and they're talking about all that. But, you know, apparently there's at least something of a consensus that some harm has been done here. You know, I mean, and again, going back to the response to this was initially to spin it and oh, it's a gaffe, or it's a, you know, it's just normal talk, and Hun Sen's the bad guy for leaking it. Well, he probably shouldn't have done that, and in the future, I'm sure anybody that ever talks to him in this way will be very circumspect about what they say, but, you know, that's not the issue. The issue is the content, and the content is her, you know, saying, hey, we'll open the border at the same time. No, I don't want to do that. And the content is also, you know, her giving away the farm, as it were, and saying that our own guy in uniform, leading our guys in uniform, who, by the way, were fired upon. As I cited in another video, along the border some time back. And again, I'm in favor of de-escalating this. Let's pull it back. Everybody come back to their sort of lines of demarcation, and everybody just simmer down, and we, this joint border committee get together and start, working out something that everybody can deal with moving forward and just kind of de-escalate it down. But then at the same time, because of her trying to save her political skin, she's doing all this stuff to look tough on Cambodia and arguably making it worse. So again, it really does come back to, and I've asked this before, if this was a man, would this person still even be in the office? Because it would be expected of a man at this point, in my opinion, to step aside. The honorable thing, the thing to do under the circumstances, as Chamberlain ended up doing in the aftermath of what turned out to be the failed project of appeasement, he stepped aside as prime minister. There's a certain point where where is it unreasonable to say, hey, maybe it's time to step down? That said, quoting further, she explained that the discussion was of a nature typically understood to be confidential and not intended for public release. Well, you're a public figure. You're talking to the de facto head of Cambodia, the guy that's been in power over there for 40 years. His son's the prime minister. He's the president of the Senate. Okay, you made the assumption, and okay, let me walk back some of my rhetoric here. If genuinely you did not intend to undermine Thailand to the extent that, frankly, as a factual matter, it has been undermined, if you did not have that intent, fair enough, okay? But at least have the intellectual honesty to say, hey, I'm out of my depth. I need to step aside. Because if you thought that, oh, it was confidential, well, one, Hun Sen's a pretty canny guy, okay? To think that what you say, especially in a submissive sort of manner, would just stay behind the curtain, if you will, I find that one to be something of a disingenuous argument. I just don't understand how you can be prime minister and be that sort of willfully naive, if you will, and maybe not willfully, but that naive. But okay, put that aside. If it's true, though, I'm sorry. It still augurs towards you need to step aside. You don't know what you're doing, because, again, yes, leaders do have these private discussions, but there's a limit there. And also, it's worth pointing out that at least we, the Thai people, would allow a certain amount of discretion on the presumption that you're operating in our interests. But where you're not, where do you think that presumption gets to be applied? That said, quoting further, quote, the clip reflects a private conversation, and I am fully prepared to confirm and explain every aspect of the matter should I be required to do so before the court, unquote. She said, well, okay, great. We'll be following that on here. I'm really curious to see your explanations for some of this stuff, especially as it pertained to the commander in the field. Quoting further, the leaked conversation included derogatory remarks about the commander of the 2nd Army region, branding him as an adversary, as well as a submissive tone towards Hun Sen, with Miss Paetongtarn signaling readiness to comply with his demands. And hence the term appeasement. That's why this isn't hyperbole here. I'm very concerned for Thailand. I'm not going to continue to just drive the point home. At this point, it's kind of beating a dead horse. But, again, if there was no ill intention, and if this was sort of if it was a mistake born of naivete, okay, fair enough. But I'm sorry, again, in the context of Chamberlain, he probably had the best intentions, at least for his own people. I don't think you could argue he had the necessarily best intentions for the Czechoslovakians at the time. But at least for Britain, he was, and if you read about the context of it, there was this element of, we were trying to buy time so we could rearm for a future conflict. But he stepped aside later because it was clear that that was not the correct path to take diplomatically. So I guess in closing on this video, what I have to say is we're certainly going to be keeping people updated with regard to the upcoming no confidence motion. And we will certainly be following any procedures and proceedings that occur in the Thai courts with respect to this, because honestly, this is probably the biggest legal issue that's going to be out there in Thailand for at least the forthcoming, 4 to 8 weeks, I would imagine, minimum.